All right. All right, welcome everyone to another edition of Grid Down. I'm your host, as always, Jonathan Hollerman. Today, I got a special guest with me, Dr. Peter Pry, and he is the perfect guest today. If you've been watching the news and reading some of the papers and what's going on with Russia right now on the borders of Ukraine, I definitely wanted to get Dr. Peter Pry on here because I wanted to ask him some questions that I'm not seeing covered in the media and get his take on it. So if you don't know, I mean, I'm sure those of you that are following me have seen the videos I've done with Dr. Peter Pry here before, but he is the executive director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security. It's a congressional advisory board, and he was part of the EMP commission. And for our talk today, he was previously an intelligence officer with the Central Intelligence Agency, responsible for analyzing Soviet and Russian nuclear strategy, operational plans, military doctrine, threat perceptions, and developing U.S. paradigms for strategic warning. So he is the right guy to have on the phone today to ask some of these questions. So how are you doing today?
Well, every day that the world doesn't go up in nuclear flames is a good day.
It is.
I'm very worried about the Biden administration being in charge when we're in the middle of this crisis. And I'm glad you're doing a show on this, because it really, I mean, we're so obsessed with coronavirus and COVID. This should be, we're on the verge, potentially on the verge of a World War III here, a nuclear World War III over this crisis. And it deserves to be the dominant media focus.
I agree 100%. There's so many things, the tit-for-tats that happen in the media, and it's all political theater, who said what, when, and the important stories like what's happening over in Russia are not getting the coverage that they're due. So the reason I had you on is for the last week, I've been reading these different news stories that come out and different reports on what's happening with Russia and with the cyber stuff that's happening in the background there. So I wanted to kind of lay out a scenario for you. It's something I've been thinking about, and I haven't seen anybody writing about this, okay? So we've seen the uptick in Russian activity, cyber activity with the Ukraine. So I don't think there's any national security expert that would debate the fact that if or when China decides to go into Ukraine, they're going to hit them with a cyber attack first, right? You would agree, right? They're going to take down their infrastructure, their electric grid, before they send troops in.
I vehemently agree. I just published a book called Blackout Warfare that tries to warn about this new way of warfare. You know, we're all focused on the tanks and the conventional weapons. You know, the new way of warfare and their doctrine combines cyber attacks with non-nuclear EMP weapons, ultimately a nuclear EMP attack, and physical sabotage, special teams going in to shoot up transformers and control systems, because you can win a war that way, just by taking out the electrical grid and collapsing the critical infrastructures. And you wouldn't need to go into a kinetic war that involves using bombs or nuclear weapons or anything else. The Russians, being extremely conservative military planners, though, they're always prepared to do both. And they've exercised this. They exercise that way as well.
Yeah, so I see the talking heads. I really don't watch much TV or the news or any of the news much, but when I do, I see these talking heads. They always bring in a security analyst, right? And they, in my opinion, they're suits. They're people that have gone to university. They're usually younger people, and they've learned about war in a book, and they still think that like the way to win wars is to build the biggest airplanes and the largest aircraft carriers, and like they're looking at historical ways of warfare, and they're not realizing, like you just mentioned, the next war is going to be fought in the electromagnetic spectrum. That's going to be the primary area of warfare. I talk about it a lot. There's a great documentary called 0 Days about the Stuxnet virus and how that was implemented. The last 5 minutes of that, I don't know if you've seen it, but the last 5 minutes of that documentary, they basically leave you with, there's no Geneva Conventions for cyber warfare, right? We have wars for how we can fight, or we have rules for how we can fight wars against other civilized nations. You can't use biological weapons. You can't use hollow point. I mean, we have these rules, but in the cyber domain, there are no rules, right? And everybody's kind of pushing and seeing how far they can take this whole cyber warfare domain thing without causing an international incident. I mean, we've seen Russia go after Ukraine's Kiev's power grid multiple times, and we've seen China use it against India. And so I guess let me build this scenario here real quick. So nobody, I haven't seen anybody honestly believe that the Ukrainians can fight a ground war and win a ground war against Russia. I just don't think that they have that capability. Just in the news today, I saw that the Biden administration is talking about like trying to arm their guerrilla forces to fight a guerrilla war after the fact, after Russia takes over. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I don't think, that has issues in and of itself. And when we did that in the past, when we armed the Mujahideen and when we did stuff covertly in Cuba and different areas, you don't telegraph it. You don't put it out in the New York Times, say, hey, this is what we're going to do. But anyways, so I fully anticipate.
May I make a comment on that?
Yeah.
It's a really important point. If we did do that, if we were foolish enough to do that, it would just provoke the Russians to invade the frontline NATO states so that they could isolate Ukraine, so that we would not have any way of getting in, weapons so that Ukraine could fight a guerrilla war. And the reason, that's the last frail hope there. All they can do is make it more costly for Russia to take over Ukraine. Our own war games show that Russia can conquer not only Ukraine, but the frontline NATO states in Eastern Europe in just 72 hours. Those are our own war games. Mm-hmm. We can't win against China either. We have had 18 war games, all of which show China winning in a war over Taiwan.
Clobbering us. I think the admiral's term was they kicked our rear ends.
Our scenarios aren't even taking into account what we were talking about previously. The blackout warfare that would precede a conventional war would probably end up being completely unnecessary for our adversaries to use conventional or nuclear forces when they use cyber and EMP to achieve victory.
Yeah. So, and the other thing is, I again, going back to how we historically fought warfares, and I would say guerrilla warfares, I don't think against a first world nation, I don't think you can fight a guerrilla. It'd be a lot more difficult than it was even 30 or 40 years ago because of the electric data gathering that they have. Before in the movie The Patriot, you could go hide out in a swamp somewhere, right? And they couldn't find you. Like in today's warfare, if you have all these Ukrainian guerrilla forces, they're going to be being tracked by drones, and every time they pull out their phone, every communication, they're going to locate where these groups of guerrilla fighters are pretty quickly compared to 50 years ago, hiding in the jungles.
There's an even more fundamental problem, because I think the West is really overestimating the political will of the Ukrainian people and their leadership to fight for independence.
Right.
They've been dominated by Russia for most of their history. That's why Russia considers Ukraine part of them. Ukraine is only recently an independent country. You can go back to the Kievan Rus, 1,000 years ago, and they were basically part of Russia. There wasn't any guerrilla war being fought by Ukraine to oppose Soviet domination. Look at how the flaccid response of Ukraine to the Crimea situation. Where's the guerrilla war in Crimea? People have basically surrendered. And what about in Eastern Ukraine, where the war continues there? There doesn't seem to be there is no equivalent to Russia's little green men. No partisans, Ukrainian partisans. It's just the Ukrainian government and the army, and they're not even winning in that war. So I think if the Russians rolled over Ukraine, they want the United States and NATO to come in and rescue them, basically. They don't want I don't think they have the will to fight for their own independence in the way the North Vietnamese fought to recapture South Vietnam, for example.
I think I saw a survey today, and who knows how accurate it is. You can't believe anything the media these days, but said that 20% of the Ukrainians were interested in fighting Russia. Like you just said, I don't think that you're going to have a huge groundswell, but even if you did have pockets of a couple thousand troops here or there, you can't hide. like you used to. It's just a matter of locating where that guerrilla warfare unit is. And like you said, Russia's little green men, they're swift, they're deadly. I just don't know that you can fight a guerrilla warfare in the 21st century like you could 50 or 100 years ago. But I still haven't, I'm doing terrible here. I still haven't gotten to my point. So how I envision this is, with that being the case, okay, Ukraine can't win a ground war against Russia. Okay, we fully anticipate Russia to attack Ukraine's infrastructure, electric grid, missile defense systems, whatever, before they go in. The only response that I see from the Ukrainian side is if they get hit with a cyber attack. In my thoughts, their only response is to hit Moscow or to hit another major Russian city with their own cyber attack, to go after the grid somewhere in Russia. And the Biden administration just sent cyber warfare teams over to Ukraine. So did Britain. I think NATO even pitched in some. To me, that was an insane thing to do, because at this point, when Ukraine's backed into a corner, if they do react with a cyber attack against Russia, Russia can now say it was the US. They were on the ground. I'm not saying we couldn't help them remotely from here, from a remote location, but if we send our cyber warfare guys in and Ukraine does attack or defend itself and go after something in Russia, that gives Putin the ammunition to hit one of our cities. Because if he's already taken out Ukraine's grid, that gives him the ammunition to say, hey, the US just attacked us through Ukraine. Their cyber warfare guys in Ukraine just attacked us. We're going to take out Atlanta. We're going to take out Seattle for a week.
John, they threatened to do that last April.
Yeah.
When we had the first Ukrainian crisis, the Ukrainian crisis now about a year ago in 2021, in April 2021, we were in a virtually identical situation where Washington was really concerned that the Russian army was going to roll. And what was her name? Margarita Simonian, who runs RT and Sputnik. She's, these are the huge Russian media giants. She's a personal friend of Vladimir Putin, and things don't get said on those airwaves unless
they're approved.
So she's an unofficial spokesman for the Kremlin, and she warned the United States and NATO. She said, if you guys interfere and come to the aid of Ukraine, the next war is going to be a cyber war, and and Russia will win it, because you're not prepared to win a cyber war, whereas we are. And we can do things like she specifically mentioned. We could black out Harlem in New York City as a demonstration of our power, or we could black out the whole state of Florida, or we could black out the whole continental United States if we want to, and you guys will lose. So you're absolutely right. And they've told us that if we do that, that they will use make catastrophic cyber attacks against us. And we're unilaterally vulnerable to those. Russia has hardened its systems, against this. I mean, have you ever wondered why? We have seen under Obama, under Trump, and under Biden, China and Russia, and even North Korea making repeated attacks against us, against our critical infrastructures, against our information systems. And when that happens, our politicians will get up and make noises about retaliating, and they're not going to get away with this. But they always get away with it. We never retaliate. We don't have a single example of where the United States has successfully retaliated against either Russia or China or North Korea. That's because when they designed their critical infrastructures, they designed them with warfare in mind. They are relying on retro technologies and things of that. They're all set for this, and they have an enormous unilateral advantage over us in this respect. And despite all the claims that the United States can make devastating cyber attacks against Russia, that hasn't been demonstrated, and I don't believe we can do it.
Well, I actually hope that's the case right now, because if I could see a tit for tat, Russia going into Ukraine hitting Russia, Russia hitting the US and maybe a city in Britain or a town or something, and then us hitting them, and this tit for tat, like you mentioned, I forget the woman's name. I shared that video. You can actually watch that interview that she gave on YouTube. It's in Russian, but you can put the subtitles on and watch. I think it's around the 50-minute mark where she made the comments that you were talking about this turning into, if they go into Ukraine and we get involved, they're going to black out one of our cities. We're going to black out one of theirs. It's going to escalate until they black out our country. It's a potential, right? And we're not ready. Our civilian population is not ready to live without electricity. We've had this conversation, and my people that follow me know where I stand on this stuff. But
we're not ready technically, but even more important, we're not ready in terms of psychologically.
That's what I was.
Doctrine.
Yeah, psychologically.
The other guys, the bad guys, Russia and China, even North Korea and Iran, have thought this through, and they understand that cyber and EMP and attacking critical infrastructures is the wave of the future, the war of the future. The war will be fought in the electromagnetic spectrum. We don't think that way. We don't understand that. We think of cyber warfare as an intermediate stage between real war. We think of it as gray zone aggression. No, it's not just gray zone aggression. It's not an intermediate stage to real war. It is the real war of the future. And our people are not ready for that. We haven't thought it through and planned it out. To us, the idea of cyber warfare is sort of what the tank was to the French in 1940. It's like the cavalry. It's an addendum to artillery and infantry. And the real war is going to be fought by the infantry and the artillery, just the way World War I was fought. They had no conception. This failure of strategic imagination is what enabled Nazi Germany to roll over France with tanks. They understood how to use the new technology and conquered France, in record time, in a lightning war, literally a lightning war blitzkrieg. And we're in a similar situation, I believe. United States, this is our 1940. Where we haven't thought through, and we don't have the cyber warfare and EMP capabilities that our adversaries have, and don't have the doctrine or the strategic imagination that they have put into this. And that is going to be decisive. You could literally win a war in less than 24 hours by this way, and we don't get that. We think it's going to be onesies and twosies, as you said.
Yeah.
The situation, we're on the threshold of a real catastrophe, about a new way of warfare that renders, thousands of years of traditional warfare, where you rely on men and tank and kinetic operations, obsolete. The way the Monitor and the Merrimack rendered wooden battleships obsolete in one battle.
Yep, that's right. And that's what I was getting at, is that we're really not prepared for the next war. We're still fighting the war from 30 years ago in this country. And our civilian population is not mentally, psychologically prepared for a blackout type warfare. I think these China and Russia, their people are a lot more hardy than the Americans have grown very, very soft in the last couple decades. The life skills and the things needed to survive that type of thing. So yeah, that was the big thing, is like, I was just shocked. Like, nobody connected those dots. Like, the fact that we are announcing that we're sending cyber warfare teams in there, that actually, you basically give Putin the reason to hit us at that point, right? It gives him reason.
He could say, oh, cyber warfare, we know that poses an existential threat to Russia, even though we don't actually have the capability to pose an existential threat to Russia by cyber. Just the fact that they know that we're putting those troops forward like that could be used as an excuse by Russia to do massive cyber attacks, because it is an existential threat. The fact that we advertise that and put it out there, this is political signaling, because we don't understand, and we think that cyber, it's not really that much of a threat. It's
right.
A gray zone threat. It's something that is before the big war, the real war that's supposed to happen. And so we can safely do that for political signaling during this crisis, not understanding that from Russia's point of view, I mean, I think they know the limitations of our cyber capabilities, but in the cyber world, that's kind of the equivalent of sending nuclear missiles into Ukraine so that you can target Moscow in a very short period of time. When you're starting to make cyber threats, they're not a gray zone threat; they're an existential threat.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's got me very concerned right now. What are your thoughts as far as, I mean, China, Taiwan has been quiet the last month. Do you anticipate, because I've always, again, I am not a political analyst or, an expert in these things, but like we see the coordination with Russia and China, the joint military exercise over the last year or two. They're playing buddy footsie to a degree lately. Could you see if or when Russia goes into Ukraine, wouldn't that be the perfect timing for China to go into Taiwan? Because we're not going to fight a war on two fronts, right?
That's what will happen.
Right.
And some in Washington and in Europe, some of our political leaders actually finally understand that that's what would happen. Before this, at the early beginning of this crisis, a number of European political leaders and some analysts in Washington said, wow, wait a minute, if Russia goes into Ukraine, it'll be the perfect opportunity for China to go after Taiwan. And they are cooperating. In the article I sent you, I think the light bulb finally went on over the heads of people in Washington that there really is a Sino-Russia axis, and it is the most formidable bloc of military economic bloc that we've ever faced in our history. And it's also on display in this crisis because of Kazakhstan. Where not only did the Russian troops go into Kazakhstan, but China did too. China sent surrogate forces in there as well, and China has supported Russia and Kazakhstan. And by the way, Kazakhstan is a signal to us. Russia didn't rescue Kazakhstan from an Islamic political revolution that was happening. Right. They provoked that. Those are little green men that caused a fake crisis to justify sending Russian troops into Kazakhstan. And basically, if they don't want to give up Kazakhstan, they don't have to. They've already, in effect, taken over Kazakhstan right under our nose, even while we're arguing about Ukraine. And it's sending us a political signal that, yeah, we're willing to go in and take over these countries. That's how serious we are. I have been in Kazakhstan and have talked to Kazakh military and political leaders. They're an intelligent people, and they're scared. They're terrified of Russia. They are so afraid of Russia. There are only 3 million people in Kazakhstan. It's a huge country. It's one of the largest countries in the world. It's filled with important natural resources. That's why Russia and China are both interested in it. Mm-hmm. And, the Kazakhs are so afraid of the Russians eventually coming back and taking over Kazakhstan that they have no army, because all they've got is a police force, but they have no standing army. And that's why the Russians were able to just take it over like that. They may not give it back, to the Kazakhs. And the Western press is so ignorant of what's going on that they don't get that. They've sort of taken at face value that, the Russians had to go in there because there was, an Islamic revolt, going on. Kazakhstan doesn't have a big problem with Islamic radicals, even though it's even though it's tied into Islamic country and all that. It's one of the countries that the long Soviet experience pretty much pacified all that. And besides, it's got such a small population, so that's just another factor where the West is, Washington and the capitals of Europe are just pretty blind to what just happened in Kazakhstan, where the Russians so quickly took them over.
Yeah, the media covered it for like 24, 48 hours, and then that was it. Same with India and China on their border right now, or they've been fighting over that little scratch of mountain land for a while, but that's been heating up. It's just, I see all these things like, 20 years ago, this would be like big news on CNN. It would be, they'd have people over there reporting on it, talking about it. And now, like, we have these major paradigmal shifts happening all around the globe that represent an existential threat to this country. And I guess that is where I'll end it, is that, like, the American people, because of the dishonest media and the implicit media with, covering both, whoever political party they're affiliated with, the American people just think that all this stuff is it's happening over there in Ukraine. It doesn't affect us here. Well, guess what? It absolutely can. If this turns into cyber warfare or tit-for-tat, cyber campaign, you could be out of power in Harlem, like you mentioned, or Atlanta or Seattle. They can reach out and touch us here on our shores and cause a lot of destruction, short of a nuclear EMP. I mean, they can hit us really hard. And I just think that it's just frustrating that nobody's aware of this stuff.
And a nuclear EMP attack is not considered nuclear warfare in their doctrine. It's part of cyber warfare or electromagnetic warfare. And so when we see them using cyber, the way to think about this is, during World War II, Nazi Germany would innovated the Blitzkrieg. It had motorcycle corps that would range out in front of the panzer divisions, but behind the motorcycles, were these massed armored divisions and air power, to come in and crush the adversary side. The way to think of cyber attacks, they're a lot more effective than motorcycle corps, but they're sort of the first thing. They are the Nazi motorcyclists on a hill overlooking our French village. Behind them are much more powerful cyber weapons that can be used to do things like shut down electric grids, shut down the food supply, shut off water, do all the things the Russians were doing in the past year, but on a much bigger scale to demonstrate to us, shut down fuel pipelines like the colonial pipeline thing, so that our civilization would simply come to a halt. And they are willing, and it's part of their doctrine, if we don't get the message and we continue to press on, to go all the way up to a nuclear EMP attack. That's part of what it is. So whenever we start feeling cyber probes against our country, keep in mind that it can go all the way that far to a nuclear EMP attack. So this is again, what we're seeing it right now, and what we were seeing earlier in the last Ukrainian crisis with Russian cyber aggression, is the equivalent of a Nazi motorcyclist sitting on a hill overlooking our French village. We shouldn't think that that's the only part of the threat is that motorcyclist up there. Behind him is this huge spearhead, of armor and air power that today in the electromagnetic spectrum is much more powerful cyber weapons, that would be brought to apply, including EMP, including non-nuclear EMP weapons, which is, we rarely talk about that. That's an intermediate stage that you could employ before you go to the all-out weapon. So this is it's, I guess, the last thought I'd like to read. How did we get into this situation? I mean, you had mentioned my credentials at the beginning of the show. One of my other credentials was when I was on the House Armed Services Committee staff, I had the portfolio for NATO expansion. And when I had that portfolio, I visited all these countries, Ukraine, the Lithuania, Baltic states. It was my job to go there and talk to their military political leaders and advise Congress on whether we should engage in NATO enlargement. And my conclusion was these countries can't defend themselves, and the United States can't defend them either. We don't have the conventional and forces to defend them. The only way we can defend them is by extended deterrence. And we shouldn't be putting the American people at risk to defend by nuclear warfare a country that most Americans can't even find on the map.
Right.
In fact, we are pledged to go to nuclear war for countries like Estonia and Lithuania and Latvia. Fortunately not Ukraine yet, but in effect, those who are arguing, oh, well, we should let Ukraine come in. Do we really want to put ourselves at risk like that? This was done in a period when we didn't think Russia would come back. You know, we thought, remember The End of History, the book, The End of History, that supposedly democracy had finally triumphed. And, you know, Russia was going to become part of the democratic solution. It was going to be join the West. It was going to be a strategic partner. And all the other countries of the world were going to follow the pathway and become like the United States. That's why they ignored me. I didn't believe that. I thought someday Russia is going to come back. And democracy, unfortunately, has not triumphed all over the world. Someday they will come back, and this would cause a new Cold War. I was in a minority, but we turned out to be right. You know, we're reaping the consequences of a policy that we did not think through well enough. You know, there are, maybe we should have another show on what is the way out of this, because you've got my article. You know, I mean, it's not popular, but Russia has given us a peace treaty, and I actually don't think that has been rejected by Washington and NATO, but the specific provisions of the peace treaty are not unreasonable. And you know, I think there's an opportunity here in these negotiations. What we should be trying to do is what we were supposed to be doing at the end of the Cold War, you know, which is making Russia a strategic partner, bringing them into the West, you know, because our best hope, and it might be our last hope, is to split the alliance between Russia and China. You know, we can't win against that alliance.
I agree.
You know, we need to divide these guys. And I would rather be, and I don't trust the Biden administration to negotiate well. I know they're going to screw up, but I'd rather screw up in the diplomatic world and have political embarrassments in terms of diplomacy than have to fight a World War III against Russia and China that we're doomed to lose. You know, those are the choices, right?
I think
future administration can correct the diplomatic blunders that the Biden administration will surely make.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid the Biden administration, to show that it's tough, you know, doesn't understand this, and it's going to be listening to the neocons and the like, want to get us into a war with Russia over Ukraine and a war with China over Taiwan. That'll be a disaster. You know, it could be the end of Western civilization, frankly.
Right. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I appreciate you coming on spur of the moment here like this and talk with this. I keep seeing all these reports about, oh, you know, the Biden administration, they're sending in our cyber warfare guys. I'm like, no, that's a bad idea. You know, at least don't telegraph it.
Right. That's right.
No, I appreciate you coming on at the last minute. Everyone that's watching this, Dr. Peter Pry has a new article out called Make Peace, Not War with Russia, discussing some of the things we talked about here. I definitely highly, it's in my top 5 list of books for my followers to check out, is Blackout Warfare by Dr. Peter Pry, which talks about all the foreign views on the threat of cyber warfare and EMP and grid down attacks, and basically the future of warfare, which so many of these experts in Washington, they just don't get. They need to read his book, because they're still fighting the wars from 50, 70 years ago, and it's not going to end well, because we are not prepared for a cyber attack or an EMP attack, our infrastructure, our people. It's going to go really bad. And the other book that he has is called The Power and the Light. It's right there on my bookshelf. And because Dr. Pry has been involved with the EMP Commission, Congressional EMP Commission, on the threat since the beginning. And it basically tells the story of how we got where we are. And the last person I would recommend following is Michael Baby. He's currently kind of the tip of the spear as far as poking and prodding at the electric utilities and FOIA requests and getting information from the inside. So make sure you check all those things out. I'll provide links down below. But again, Peter, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. And you know, I look forward to having you on here again.
Well, I'd like to say it was a pleasure, but it's you know, my hat is off to you for speaking truth to power here. You know, it's one of the only shows that really understands the reality of what we're facing. So I thank you for the opportunity to share my views on this.
Well, thank you so much. Everybody, it's Friday night. I'm going home for dinner. So as always, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and let God do the rest. One second. One moment here. I'll have to clip the end of this because I lost my stop recording. There it is.